While shopping for our wedding jewelry, my fiance, Xavier Shepherd, buys 2 pieces so that my sister, Abigail Young, can get the first pick as always. One is a pink diamond necklace that he tracks down across 3 cities before winning at auction for a fortune. The other is a cheap black brooch that comes free with the necklace. It doesn't even go with my wedding dress. For the first time, I point to the necklace before my sister can. Can I choose first this time? Xavier ruffles my hair. Abigail has always liked being first. If she can't have what she wants, she'd rather have nothing at all, he says. You're not picky. Whatever's left will do. I say nothing. An empty feeling settles in my chest. I've known Xavier for 20 years. Whenever I'm with him, I'm always the one who gets my sister's leftovers. Whenever he cuts up a watermelon in the summer, he would always serve Abigail the first slice. She would always choose the reddest, seedless piece from the center. Then he would hand me the slice closest to the rind that's ridden with seeds. This one's ripe too. It's not as sweet, but it'll do. When he buys a new car, Abigail gets the first pick again. She takes the front passenger seat because it's the least likely to make her carsick. Xavier gestures toward the back. It's a little cramped back there, but either seat is yours. Later on, I realize that his love is no different. He loves Abigail, but she chooses her academic career and dreams over him. With her gone, he switches sides and confesses to me instead. To him, I have always been the second choice. I stare at the black brooch and push it away. You can have them both, Abigail. I don't want it either. I'm done settling for her hand-me-downs. Wanda, cheap accessories like these would never suit Abigail, Xavier Shepherd said with a weary sigh. I stared at him. Then why would they suit me? He paused, then gave me a helpless smile. When you 2 were kids, everyone used to say you were her shadow. The pink diamond is too flashy for you. Black suits you better. It doesn't demand attention. Abigail Young's shadow. That was what everyone had called me for 10 years. My sister and I were twins, but I could never measure up to her. At school, she was always at the top of her class. I would stay up late and study until my eyes burned, but I could never rise above average. You're twins. How did you end up being so stupid? Mom asked. Forget it. It's enough that one child in this family is smart. I was always trailing after Abigail, carrying her bag and peeling apples for her. I told Xavier countless times that I hated that nickname. He would always apologize and say he wouldn't call me that again, but whenever Abigail was around, he would fall right back into it. I looked at Xavier calmly. Let's break up. He stared at me for a moment, then smiled as if he was humoring a child. All right. If you don't like the brooch, we'll pick something else out. Did you really have to say that? Let's head to the mall, and you can find something you like. Okay. Abigail pushed the pink diamond necklace toward me. Take my necklace. You're getting married soon. You're not a kid anymore. Quit being stubborn. No, I picked that necklace out for you, Xavier said, stopping her. Such a thing wouldn't suit Wanda. Giving it to her would just be a waste. Despite saying I could pick out whatever I wanted, he had already chosen that necklace for Abigail. Xavier put an arm around my shoulders and led me outside. As soon as we reached the first floor of the mall, Abigail said she wanted to look at a newly released perfume. Xavier immediately nodded. Let's have a look at the perfume first. I'll get you your gift after that. There's no rush. It was always like this. Abigail spent a long time trying on perfumes at the counter. She liked 2 bottles, but she couldn't decide between them. Xavier noticed her hesitation. Just get both. Pick one to use first, and give the other to Wanda. If you feel like using the other one, you can switch with her. After paying, he handed me the bottles of perfume. Now you don't have to choose a gift anymore. Abigail's got good taste. You should be happy with these. I didn't take them. I looked at the perfume bottles, and the irony hit me. I thought I was supposed to be the one choosing. I'll head back and move my things out of your apartment. I won't be coming back. Xavier's hand froze in midair. For the first time, he looked like he was taking me seriously. Don't do this, Wanda. That night, he called my parents over. The moment Mom entered the house, she poked at my temple. Have you lost your mind? Why are you talking about breaking up? What makes you think you're good enough for Xavier? You're average-looking and dim-witted. If your sister hadn't been busy with her career, do you really think you'd have had a chance? My temple throbbed. I had heard those words way too many times. Every single word felt familiar. I was stupid. I was ugly. I was never as good as Abigail. Xavier stepped in front of me and tried to smooth things over. Don't say that, Mr. and Mrs. Young. Wanda's the best. She definitely has a chance with me. Mom immediately looked at him with approval. Just look at him defending you. Where are you ever going to find someone this good again? She nagged. If you break up with him, you're not my daughter anymore. Right. Xavier was such a good man. I should have been grateful. I took a deep breath and muttered. Okay. Everyone finally relaxed. It was as if the disobedient child had finally learned to behave. I went back to my room. I called my friend, Julie Davidson. as tears silently fell down my face. Julie, can I come work at your pottery studio? Aren't you getting married soon? Will they let you come over? She asked cautiously. I looked out at the night beyond the window and suddenly smiled. What do you think about me running away from my wedding in a week? Julie was in disbelief. In her eyes, I had always been the good daughter. I was the obedient one. The one who never complained or fought back. Running away from my wedding was the last thing anyone would have expected from me. But if I stopped being obedient, would anyone still love me? Growing up, Abigail had always been in the spotlight. Everyone was drawn to her. I tried desperately to reach her. The only way I could get Xavier or my parents to notice me was by doing exactly what I was told. But I didn't want to be obedient anymore. The next day, Xavier took me to see the house we were going to renovate for our wedding. I headed toward the passenger seat, but he held me back. Silly girl. That's Abigail's seat. Abigail appeared at that moment. Xavier opened the passenger door for her. Abigail's thinking about buying a house too. She's coming with us to take a look. I silently sat in the back. Sure. Our house was a small detached villa. Abigail's eyes lit up the moment she saw our bedroom. The lighting is perfect. It's just the right humidity. It would be a great place to grow the experimental strains I've developed. Xavier stood beside her. You can stay here whenever you want since you like this room. I'll have the company's best designer redo it for you. I stood at the doorway. When we bought the house, Xavier never got involved in anything. He didn't care where we bought it or how it was decorated. A house is a house, he would say, as long as it's livable. Now, however, he was standing beside Abigail while planning the room's design with her. They looked like a real newlywed couple. Abigail looked over her shoulder at me. Wanda, do you mind if I take this room? I turned to Xavier. You do know this was supposed to be our bedroom, right? His expression remained calm. It's just a bedroom. The cultures aren't going to adapt to a different room on their own. You can have the other rooms. I slowly unclenched my hand. You're my sister. Take whichever room you want, I told Abigail. Xavier patted my head. That's a good girl. By the time we finished touring the house, the bridal boutique had called Xavier. All 3 of my wedding dresses were ready. Abigail slipped her arm through mine. Come on, Wanda. I'll help you with your dresses. She really did look like the perfect older sister. While I was halfway through trying them on, her phone rang. She let out a troubled frown. The gown I was supposed to wear to an important dinner fell through. I can't find another one in time. You can get one here, Xavier said. He glanced around the boutique, but none of the dresses seemed good enough for him. In the end, his eyes settled on the reception dress I was wearing. This color looked good on Abigail. She should have it. Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Wanda has been back here more than 30 times for this dress. She even revised the design herself. The sales assistant spoke up. Besides, no bride wants to wear a second-hand dress. Xavier looked at me as if the answer were obvious. He didn't think there was anything wrong with his request. If Abigail wanted something, she would get it. I pressed a hand to my chest. It didn't hurt as much as it did before. I changed out of the dress and handed it to Abigail. It's fine. The dress will look even better on you. Surprise crossed Xavier's face. Then his expression softened. You're such a good girl, Wanda. I'll help you find something even better. But once Abigail had changed into the dress, he couldn't take his eyes off her. He crouched down and carefully smoothed out every wrinkle on her skirt. I used to imagine him doing that for me. I'd been here more than 30 times, yet he had only come with me once. The sales assistant smiled and said it would be romantic if Xavier helped me with my dress. That's so pretentious. We've paid for the service. Isn't that what the staff are for? He replied without even looking up. The sight of him kneeling at Abigail's feet finally made me realize the price of that fantasy. Ever since we were kids, everyone had always preferred Abigail. My parents did. And so did Xavier. Yet I still couldn't stop loving him. He was the only one who secretly slipped me a piece of candy when my parents would scold me for being stupid and say, "You're still cute, even if you're a little dumb." I hid my feelings deep inside. One day, he confessed his feelings to Abigail. She had told him that she only cared about her career. Devastated, he confessed to me instead. I knew he was only acting out of hurt, but I said yes anyway. I stayed by his side and became his assistant even though I loved art more. I studied the complicated data and confusing documents he cared about in an attempt to become more like Abigail. But no matter how hard I tried, I could never be like her. Xavier would never love me. My phone buzzed. The pottery studio's ready. When are you coming over? By then, Abigail had already changed out of her dress. Xavier casually picked up a black dress and handed it to me. Hurry up and pick one. Abigail has something else to attend to. Don't keep her waiting. I think this dress works. It's simple and elegant. It suits you. Black again. The color I hated the most. I lowered my head and replied to Julie's message. On my wedding day. I told you that's when I was going to run away. When we returned to my parents' house for dinner that night, I realized it was Abigail's and my birthday. Xavier had picked out our cake. Since you two share a birthday, we only need one cake. It makes things easy. The cake was beautiful, but there were big chunks of mango visible in the filling. Abigail loved mango, but I was allergic to it. No one seemed to think that was a problem, however. Xavier was busy lighting the candles and putting a birthday hat on Abigail. Abigail gets to make a wish first. I stared at the mango cake, then at the birthday hat on her head. Then, my gaze landed on Xavier's gentle smile. You used to make sure there were two of everything. Why is there only one cake now? I asked. Why am I always the one who goes second? The living room went quiet. Xavier Shepherd. We've always done it this way. Why are you acting up today? Mom glared at me too. Abigail's the older sister. Besides, she's better than you in every way. Obviously, she should go first. If you were even half as capable as she is, I'd let you blow out the candles first. I was at a loss for words. Abigail started making her wish. The whole family gathered around her and sang happy birthday. By the time it was my turn to make a wish, the candles were almost gone. Xavier glanced at them and said, there aren't any extra candles. It's just a wish. You can do it next year. 20 years. Every year. He told me to make a wish the following year. But I never got to make that wish. Was a child who wasn't good enough not worthy of love? I quietly watched them cut the cake. My mind was elsewhere. Somehow, the conversation turned to the wedding. How are the wedding plans coming along? Mom asked suddenly. Before I could answer, she turned to Xavier. Xavier, aren't all the guests you invited from your business circle? Abigail just launched her new experimental product. This would be the perfect opportunity for her to promote it during the wedding. Xavier didn't hesitate for even a second. He smiled and nodded. Sure. We'll cut the part where the host talks about how Wanda and I met so Abigail can introduce her product instead. We don't have to cut that out. I'll just say a few words so I won't take the spotlight away from Wanda. Xavier's expression turned serious. How could we do that? If you're going to pitch your product, you should do it properly. Don't worry. I'll take care of it. The three of them talked excitedly about where to set up the display booth, when Abigail should go on stage, and whether they needed banners. This was supposed to be my wedding, but they were turning it into a product showcase. No one had even bothered to ask me what I thought. Fortunately, the wedding wasn't going to happen anyway. The room was suffocating, so I headed back to my room. Xavier and my parents waited in the living room for the live broadcast of the national competition Abigail had joined. The results were coming out tonight. Everyone stared nervously at the screen. They were barely even breathing. Meanwhile, I was upstairs packing up my things. There wasn't much worth taking. In the end, all I took was my sketchbook from the back of the drawer. It was filled with drawings I had made when I was a child. Abigail had taken first place in the competition. A cheer suddenly erupted outside my room. I heard laughter, applause, and excited shouting from the living room. Then I heard Abigail's spoiled complaint. The award ceremony is on the same day as Wanda's wedding. None of you can come with me. This is such an important moment for me, and I'll be there all by myself. What a waste. The living room fell silent for a moment. Then I heard Xavier say, you won't be alone. There was a knock on my door. Xavier stood at the doorway. Wanda, Abigail's award ceremony is something she'll only experience once in her lifetime. It really matters to her, he began cautiously. Why don't we move our wedding to the evening? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How many weddings did a person even get in their lifetime? Who holds a wedding at night? Only second marriages are held at night, the housekeeper muttered. Mom immediately scolded her. That's nonsense. You're young. Don't believe in pointless superstitions. Xavier looked at me with a firm expression. Are you okay with that, Wanda? I know how understanding you are. I met his gaze. Suddenly, memories of when I was younger hit me. Back then, I had finally won an award in a drawing competition, and was excited for my parents to come watch me receive it. But they said Abigail's speech competition was more important, and went to watch her compete instead. Xavier pitied me. Don't worry. I'll definitely be there when you receive your award. In the end, he went to Abigail's speech competition too. I stood alone on the stage while everyone else's parents cheered. Years later, I was still alone. Sure. I'm fine with it. Let's move the wedding to the evening. After all, it didn't matter when the wedding was held if it wasn't really for me. Once they got the answer they wanted, they started celebrating. Laughter filled the living room. By the end of the night, Xavier was drunk. They said that drunken words were sober thoughts. I looked into his dazed eyes and blurted, Xavier, are you looking forward to our wedding? He didn't answer. The wind slipped between us. Then, why did you confess to me? Why did you choose to be with me? I knew he did it just to spite Abigail, but I wanted to hear him say it himself. His voice was slurred with alcohol. Just finding someone who's even half as much like her is the best I could hope for, he rambled. Besides, you're her sister. Being with you means I can still see her. The wind stung my eyes. By the time I realized it, I had already run out of tears. The truth was far crueler than I expected. On the day of the wedding, the house was already bustling before sunrise. None of it was for my wedding though. They were picking out outfits, doing their makeup, and planning how to get to Abigail's award ceremony. I walked out of my room, fully dressed. I'm going to skip the award ceremony. I still have things to take care of for the wedding. Xavier didn't even look up. He was busy making sure Abigail had everything she needed. Sure, go ahead. Don't keep the guests waiting. I picked up a small bag and left the house. Then I headed straight to the airport. As my car pulled away, I saw Xavier's car in the rearview mirror. My family happily got into it and left for Abigail's award ceremony. The ceremony lasted for 4 hours. Meanwhile, 4 hours later, I had landed in South City. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Xavier. Wanda, since the wedding isn't until tonight, let's skip the pre-wedding stuff. I'll head over later. Abigail won't be able to handle things on her own. You can head to the hotel first, okay? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I blocked him and put my phone away. Julie came over and hugged me. Let's go. Meanwhile, after the awards ceremony had ended, Xavier and the others rushed to the wedding venue. When they arrived, everything was a mess. A friend grabbed Xavier's arm. Didn't you say the bride would be here first? Why hasn't she shown up yet? Xavier Shepherd. The wedding planner spotted him and hurried over. Mr. Shepherd, we haven't been able to reach the bride. The grand ballroom of the Grand Hyatt smelled of imported white lilies, expensive perfume, and mounting disaster. 300 guests, business partners of the Shepherd family, city officials, and society columnists, sat at round tables draped in silk, murmuring among themselves. The string quartet had already played the processional march 4 times. What do you mean, you haven't been able to reach her? Xavier demanded, his voice dropping into that low, dangerous register he used when a business acquisition went south. He gripped the wedding planner's shoulder so hard the man winced. Mr. Shepherd, Ms. Wanda hasn't answered her phone since noon, the planner stammered, pulling a tablet from beneath his arm. And there's another issue. The bridal suite was cleared out this morning. Her personal belongings are gone. She even returned the floral arrangements for the dressing room 3 days ago. That's impossible, Mom interjected, bustling forward in her bespoke magenta mother of the bride gown, her gold bracelets clinking furiously. Wanda wouldn't. Daddy. She's probably just stuck in traffic or throwing another one of her childish fits because we made her wait during Abigail's ceremony. Mom turned to the room with a practiced, dismissive wave. She's always been dramatic. She wants Xavier to go down to the lobby and coax her up with an apology. Just give her 20 minutes. She's not in the lobby, a quiet voice said. Abigail walked up, holding her gold competition trophy in one arm. She looked radiant, her cheeks flushed with the triumph of her academic victory, wearing the custom reception gown Xavier had taken from Wanda's fitting. I tried calling her 5 times from the car, Abigail said, sighing with theatrical disappointment. Her phone is completely turned off. I told you. Xavier, Wanda was sulking all morning. She was jealous because the entire family came to support me today instead of watching her get her makeup done. Xavier Shepherd. The muscles in his neck jumped. He pulled out his phone, his thumb flying across the screen as he dialed Wanda's number. The number you have dialed is currently powered off or out of the service area. He switched to WeChat. Beside his last message, you can head to the hotel first, okay? There was a small red exclamation mark. Message could not be sent. You have been blocked by this contact. Xavier's breath caught in his throat. Blocked? He muttered, staring at the screen as if it were written in a foreign language. She blocked me. What a ridiculous child. Dad scoffed, his face turning an angry shade of mottled purple. In front of all our colleagues. If she thinks she can humiliate the Young and Shepherd families like this, she has another thing coming. Xavier, don't indulge her. When she crawls back tomorrow, we'll make her apologize to every single guest in this room. Wait, the planner said hesitantly, tapping his tablet. There's a package left at the front reception desk. It was dropped off by a courier at 3 o'clock. It's addressed to Mr. Shepherd. Xavier didn't wait. He strode across the polished marble floor of the foyer, his long legs eating up the distance, his tuxedo jacket flaring behind him. On the granite reception counter sat a small, flat cardboard box tied with cheap twine. Xavier tore the twine off with trembling fingers and ripped the lid open. Inside lay 3 items. First was a sleek black jewelry case. When he snapped it open, the black crystal brooch he had tossed to Wanda at the jeweler's sat on the velvet cushion, untouched, with the original price tag of free gift with purchase still taped to the underside. Second was the receipt for the engagement ring, stamped in bold red ink. Returned/refunded to original payment method. And third was a single sheet of paper torn from a sketchbook. It was a drawing of 3 figures beneath an umbrella in the pouring rain. A boy was holding the umbrella high above a smiling, beautiful girl in a bright yellow coat, shielding her completely from the storm. Standing 3 paces behind them in the dark, entirely exposed to the driving rain, was a small faceless shadow of a girl whose clothes were soaked through to the skin. Across the bottom of the sketch, written in neat, deliberate handwriting that didn't shake in the slightest, were 6 words. "You can keep the umbrella, Xavier." Xavier stared at the sketch. The noise of the bustling hotel lobby seemed to rush away, replaced by a deafening, hollow ringing in his ears. His fingers clamped around the paper so hard that the edges crinkled and tore. "Xavier." Abigail's soft voice drifted from behind him. She peered over his shoulder, her brow furrowing in irritation as she saw the drawing. "What is that? Did she really run away? Today of all days?" She clicked her tongue, reaching out to touch his sleeve. "Honestly, she's so selfish. How could she ruin your big day just to prove a point? Look at all the guests waiting in the hall. Why don't we just tell everyone the wedding is postponed, and I'll go on stage and present my research slides instead? That way, the hall won't go to waste and—" "Shut up," Xavier whispered. Abigail froze, her hand hovering in midair. "What did you say?" Xavier slowly turned around. His eyes, usually so sharp and controlled, were bloodshot, dilated with a cold, terrifying fury that Abigail had never seen in 20 years of knowing him. "I said," Xavier snarled, his voice rising until it echoed off the high glass ceilings of the lobby. "Shut your mouth, Abigail." The wedding was cancelled. The guests were dismissed with hasty, humiliating apologies from the elder Shepherds, who had to endure the muffled snickers and judgmental glances of the city's business elite. Mom spent the entire evening screaming into her phone, threatening to cut Wanda off from the family registry, while Dad sat in the corner of their living room, nursing a glass of scotch, repeating that Wanda was an ungrateful wretch who would come begging for bread within 48 hours. "She has no money," Dad declared, slamming his glass down on the coffee table. "She quit her job at Xavier's firm 3 months ago to prepare for this wedding. She has no independent income. She has no connections. Where is she going to go? A motel? She'll be back on her knees by Monday." Xavier didn't join their conversation. He drove through the dark city streets like a madman, blowing through 2 red lights until he screeched to a halt outside the detached villa in the northern suburbs, the house they were supposed to move into tonight. He pushed the front door open. The house was pitch black, smelling of fresh paint, polished wood, and absolute emptiness. Xavier flicked the light switches. The living room was completely bare. The customized furniture he had refused to look at had never been delivered. In the center of the kitchen counter sat a single key and an envelope containing the property transfer waiver Wanda had signed, surrendering her half of the house back to him without claiming a single penny of equity. He walked upstairs, his heavy footsteps echoing hollowly against the uncarpeted stairs. He stopped outside the master bedroom, the room Abigail had claimed for her laboratory strains. The door was ajar. Inside, the moonlight spilled through the massive bay windows, illuminating a bare wooden floor. In the corner of the room, on the windowsill, sat a small, potted cactus. Tied to the pot was a faded red ribbon with a handwritten note in pencil. "Water once every 3 weeks. It doesn't need much sunlight, and it doesn't complain when you forget it." Xavier's knees gave out. He sank onto the dusty floorboards, his back hitting the wall, the crumpled sketch from the lobby still clutched in his fist. "You're not picky. Whatever's left will do." His own careless words from the jewelry counter echoed through his mind like a physical blow to the chest. He closed his eyes, and suddenly, memories he had spent years burying came rushing to the surface with the force of a tidal wave. He remembered the summer they were 15, when he had bought a watermelon from the market on a blistering afternoon. He had cut the sweet, seedless heart out of the center and handed it to Abigail on a porcelain plate. Wanda had stood beside the sink, holding a bowl of salt water to wash the fruit, looking at him with wide, quiet eyes. He had handed her the thick, pale green rind with a few scattered seeds. "This one's ripe too," he had told her with a careless laugh. "It's not as sweet, but it'll do." Wanda had eaten the rind in silence, chewing slowly, smiling politely when he asked if it was good, never once complaining that her tongue was numb from the bitterness. He remembered her 22nd birthday, when he had taken her to an upscale restaurant and ordered a table full of spicy Szechuan dishes because Abigail had mentioned in a group chat that she was craving chili oil. Wanda had sat across from him, silently dipping each piece of meat into a glass of warm water, her eyes watering from the spice, her stomach cramping from her chronic gastritis. When he asked why she wasn't eating much, she had forced a smile and said, "I'm just enjoying watching you eat." And he had believed her, because it was convenient. Because it cost him nothing to believe that Wanda was simple, that Wanda had no desires, that Wanda was an endless, bottomless well of quiet compliance that would never run dry. Wanda, Xavier choked out, burying his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking in the dark room. The house did not answer. There was only the cold night wind rattling the windowpane and the silent, uncomplaining cactus on the sill. 2 months passed. The autumn rain swept through the city, stripping the plane trees bare and turning the streets into slick, gray ribbons of mud. Xavier sat in his corner office on the 32nd floor of Shepherd Holdings, staring at a 3-inch thick spreadsheet on his desk. His hair was unkempt, his eyes bloodshot, his tie loosened around an unbuttoned collar. Over the past 8 weeks, he had lost 15 pounds. Mr. Shepherd, his new executive secretary, whispered timidly from the doorway. The quarterly logistics report for the harbor project is due in 30 minutes. The auditing firm says there are 16 conflicting entries in the secondary supply chain manifests. Xavier massaged his throbbing temples. Where are the archived raw data sheets? From last year? I don't know, sir. The secretary stammered, trembling. Ms. Wanda used to keep all the cross-indexed trade files in her private encrypted drive. Didn't leave the master decryption key before she resigned. Then find someone who can crack it. Xavier roared, slamming his fountain pen onto the mahogany desk, ink splattering across the pristine white paper. What am I paying a 5-person analytics team for? The secretary shrank back, murmured an apology, and fled the office, pulling the heavy double doors shut. Xavier collapsed back into his high-backed leather chair, breathing heavily. He hadn't realized until Wanda vanished just how much of his empire had been built on her silent labor. When Wanda was his assistant, his calendar was never double-booked. His coffee was always 85 degrees, brewed with low-acidity beans that didn't irritate his stomach ulcers. His contract briefs were annotated with color-coded tabs highlighting hidden liability clauses that his high-priced legal team had missed. She had worked 14-hour days beside him, declining an executive title, because his mother had warned her that a wife shouldn't outshine her husband in the office. Now his corporate operations were in chaos. The phone on his desk buzzed. It was an internal line from the security lobby. Mr. Shepherd, Miss Abigail Young is downstairs. She's demanding to see you. He says it's an emergency regarding the university audit. Xavier's expression hardened. Send her up. A minute later, Abigail stormed into the office. She was no longer the composed, untouchable academic prodigy who walked into galas with her chin lifted high. Her designer trench coat was wrinkled, her makeup hurried, and her eyes wide with frantic, undisguised panic. Xavier, you have to talk to the dean of the Science Academy, Abigail cried, slamming a red-stamped university document onto his desk. They're freezing my research grant. They're accusing me of data fabrication on the agricultural strain that won the national award. Xavier looked down at the document without moving. Why would they freeze it if your research is sound? Because the peer review committee requested the raw laboratory journals and the statistical regression models from the second phase of trials. Abigail shrieked, pacing across his office, her acrylic nails digging into her leather handbag. I can't find the backup logs. Wanda had them. Xavier went entirely still. He slowly raised his head, his dark eyes locking onto Abigail's face with a chilling, predatory focus. Wanda had them? Xavier asked, his voice dangerously soft. Why would my ex-fiance have the raw research logs for your national award-winning paper? Abigail. Abigail froze. Her breath caught in her throat, realizing what she had just let slip. I mean, she was helping me with the administrative filing. Abigail stammered, her eyes darting away. She was just organizing the charts. Wanda didn't study administrative filing at university, Xavier said, rising from his chair, his tall frame casting a long, suffocating shadow over her. She studied biochemical engineering. She spent 3 years in the university library while you were attending charity balls and networking with sponsors. He stepped around the desk, stopping 3 inches from Abigail, his gaze stripping away the last shreds of her polished veneer. You didn't write that paper, did you? Xavier whispered, each word landing like an anvil. You took her experimental data, put your name at the top of the author list, and let our parents tell her she was too stupid to understand science. Xavier, that's not true, Abigail cried, tears spilling over her lashes, reaching out to grasp his lapels just as she had done 1,000 times before. I'm your Abigail. You've loved me for 20 years. You promised you would always protect me. Xavier looked down at her hands on his jacket. For 20 years, he had treated this woman like a sacred, untouchable goddess. On a pedestal, he had given her the center of every watermelon, the front seat of every car, the first choice of every jewel, and the heart of his youth. And looking at her now, All he saw was a shallow, parasitic thief who had devoured her own sister's life and left behind a trail of hollow ash. Xavier reached up, took Abigail's wrists in his hands and peeled her fingers off his jacket with cold, deliberate force. "Get out of my office, Abigail," Xavier said, turning his back on her. "And don't come back." 1,000 miles away, the city of South City was bathed in golden, late afternoon sunlight. The air here was warm, smelling of salt water, blooming jasmine, and the earthy, mineral scent of wet terracotta clay. In an open-air studio located in the converted warehouse district near the docks, the sound of a pottery wheel hummed with a steady, rhythmic whir. I sat on a low wooden stool, my sleeves rolled up to my elbows, my hands covered in pale gray clay. The wheel spun beneath my foot, and under the gentle, practiced pressure of my palms, a lump of raw earth blossomed outward, rising into the elegant, sweeping curve of a wide-mouthed vase. "Look at that symmetry," Julie said, walking over with 2 cups of iced lemonade, setting one on the wooden workbench beside me. "The gallery owner from the city center came by while you were in the kiln room. He wants 6 more pieces from the second slice collection for the autumn preview." I wiped a streak of clay from my cheek with the back of my wrist, smiling as I eased the wheel to a stop. "Did he like the new glazes?" I asked. "He was obsessed," Julie grinned, leaning against the workbench. "He said the transition from the rough, unglazed black stoneware at the base into that blazing, sun-drenched coral at the rim was the most raw, visceral piece of visual storytelling he's seen all year." I looked down at the vase on the wheel. When I first arrived in South City 6 months ago, my hands had trembled every time I touched the clay. For 20 years, my mother's voice had echoed in my head. "You're average-looking and dim-witted. It's enough that one child in this family is smart." I had believed that my love for art was just an inferior hobby, a childish distraction that proved I was incapable of serious thought. It was only when I spent 80 hours a week in this studio, feeling the clay respond to the weight of my fingers, watching the colors transform inside the 1200-degree heat of the kiln, that I finally understood. I was never stupid. I had simply been starved of light in a room where all the windows were opened. Only for Abigail. "Ensley," Julie called gently, holding up a local cultural magazine. "You're on page 4. I took the magazine with clean hands. On the glossy page was a full-color photograph of my latest installation. A series of 7 ceramic platters, each carved with intricate reliefs of broken vines blooming into wild, uncultivated mountain orchids. The headline read, "Emerging Artist Abigail Young, Finding the Center of the Wheel." Beneath the article, the critic had written, "Young's work carries an extraordinary, haunting power, the voice of a creator who has spent a lifetime in the shadows, finally stepping into the blinding, unapologetic sunlight." I traced the printed letters of my own name, Wanda Young, not Abigail's twin, not the girl who sat in the back seat, not the shadow who wore black so she wouldn't demand attention, just Wanda. My phone buzzed on the workbench. It was an email from the National Crafts Council confirming that my solo exhibition had been approved for the Seaside Pavilion in October. I looked out through the open warehouse doors at the deep blue expanse of the southern sea. The breeze blew in, warm and sweet, carrying the laughter of children playing on the pier and the distant cries of gulls wheeling through the sky. For the first time in 24 years, I took a deep, unrestricted breath, and my chest didn't ache at all. While my studio was preparing for the autumn exhibition, the news from my hometown reached South City through national academic journals. The University Academic Oversight Committee had concluded its formal investigation into Abigail Young. The findings were devastating. Without the statistical models and algorithmic corrections I had quietly implemented into her database over 3 years, Abigail had been completely unable to replicate her experimental results before the Independent Review Board. Under forensic digital analysis, the university technicians discovered that the raw data files had been generated from my student account 2 years prior, while Abigail's login had only been used to export the final text and attach her name to the title page. The National Science Council revoked her first-place award. The university expelled her from the postgraduate fellowship, stripped her of her academic credentials, and issued a formal public reprimand that made front-page news across the state. The scandal destroyed my parents' social standing. Dad's consulting firm lost 3 major municipal contracts within 48 hours as corporate clients severed ties to avoid the fallout. Mom was quietly removed from her seat on the local hospital charity board, her former bridge partners refusing to return her calls. Then came the financial reckoning. To fund Abigail's lavish lifestyle and maintain the appearance of a wealthy prodigy, Mom had taken out a secondary mortgage on their home, expecting Abigail to secure a multi-million-dollar corporate sponsorship upon graduation. With the award revoked, the sponsors sued for breach of contract, demanding the Return of their $200,000 promotional advances. One evening, Julie brought her tablet over to my workbench, showing me a local news clip from our hometown. A reporter stood outside my parents' suburban house, interviewing neighbors as two moving vans were loaded with antique furniture. Mom was caught on camera, her hair disheveled, shouting at the reporters, her face lined with exhaustion and rage. Beside her, Abigail stood in a cheap hoodie, her head bowed low, shielding her face from the cameras as she dragged a cardboard box toward a rental sedan. They're selling the house, Julie murmured. I looked at the screen for 3 seconds. I saw the mother who had told me I wasn't her daughter anymore if I broke up with Xavier. I saw the sister who had casually demanded my wedding dress and my bedroom, without a shred of remorse. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no burning thrill of revenge. I felt only the vast, quiet indifference of a traveler looking at a dried-up puddle on a road she would never walk again. Pass me the terracotta glaze, Julie, I said softly, setting the tablet aside. The kiln needs to be loaded before sunset. The bell above the studio's wooden courtyard gate chimed with a soft, melodic ring. It was a Tuesday morning, and the coastal fog was just beginning to burn off the harbor. Julie had gone to the freight terminal to collect a shipment of white porcelain clay, leaving me alone in the sunlit courtyard, trimming the rough edges of 20 newly fired tea bowls. Footsteps crunched against the gravel path. Slow, hesitant, heavy. Wanda. The voice was rough, cracked, sounding as if it had been dragged across broken glass. My hands did not shake. The trimming knife in my right hand completed its smooth, circular arc around the base of the cup before I set it down on the wooden table. I looked up. Standing at the entrance of the courtyard, beneath the blooming bougainvillea arch, was Xavier Shepherd. He looked like a man who had walked through a fire and brought the ashes with him. His bespoke tailoring was gone. He wore a plain, dark gray wool coat that looked rumpled and damp around the shoulders. His frame was noticeably thinner, his cheekbones sharp, his eyes sunken into dark, bruised hollows. In his hands he was clutching 2 items, a velvet jeweler's box, and a white pastry box tied with pink silk ribbon from a bakery in our hometown. We stood 10 feet apart, separated by the scent of wet clay, sea salt, and 8 months of silence. You're hard to find, Xavier whispered, his voice trembling as he took a single, unsteady step forward. I hired 3 private investigators. I checked every art school from Seattle to San Diego. It took me 2 months just to trace the shipping manifests for your clay. I remained seated on my wooden stool, wiping my palms on my coral linen apron. This is private property, Mr. Shepherd, I said, my voice polite, level, and entirely devoid of inflection. If you're looking to commission gallery work, you'll need to contact the curator in the city center. Xavier flinched as if I had struck him across the face. Mr. Shepherd? He choked out, stepping closer, his knuckles whitening around the boxes in his hands. Wanda, please. Don't talk to me like I'm a stranger. I know what happened. I know everything. He set the pastry box on the edge of the stone bench with frantic, clumsy movements. Look, he said, popping the cardboard lid open. It's the peach tarts from the French bakery on 4th Street. The ones without mango. I drove across town at 5 in the morning to get them fresh before my flight. I remembered, Wanda. I remembered you like peaches. I looked down at the tarts. The glazed fruit was shiny, pristine, sitting on golden puff pastry. And this, Xavier continued, his hands shaking so violently he nearly dropped the velvet box as he flipped the brass clasp open. Inside lay the pink diamond necklace. The stone caught the southern sunlight, flashing with brilliant, multifaceted sparks of rose and platinum. I bought it back from the estate auction, Xavier wept, tears finally spilling over his lashes, tracking down his hollow cheeks. I didn't give it to Abigail. I took it back. I had the jeweler resize the chain to your exact measurements. It's yours, Wanda. It was always supposed to be yours. He stepped forward, his knees hitting the gravel as he dropped to the ground, before my workbench, holding the diamond up toward me like a beggar pleading for scraps of bread. Come home, Wanda, he sobbed, his forehead nearly touching the hem of my apron. The house in the suburbs. I kicked everyone out. I fired the contractors. I left the master bedroom empty just like you wanted. I'll buy you the biggest studio in the city. I'll carry your clay. I'll wash your brushes. I don't care about Abigail. I haven't spoken to her in 3 months. I only want you. I looked down at the heir to the Shepherd fortune kneeling in the gravel at my feet. I saw the pink diamond. I saw the peach tarts. I saw the tears streaming down his face. And for the first time in 20 years, I saw the truth of who Xavier Shepherd really was. He was not a man who had suddenly discovered true love. He was simply a spoiled, arrogant child who had spent his entire life taking the center of the watermelon, and now that the table was empty, he couldn't bear the taste of the bitter rind he had left for himself. Xavier, I said softly. He snapped his head up, a wild, desperate flare of hope igniting in his bloodshot eyes. Yes, Wanda? Yes, my love. Do you know why I always ate the watermelon near the rind? I asked, my voice calm and gentle as the morning tide. Xavier blinked, his lips parting in confusion. Because you said it was refreshing. No, I replied, shaking my head faintly. Because whenever I reached for the center slice, you would move the plate toward Abigail. And I loved you so much that I convinced myself that eating bitter things was a price worth paying to stay by your side. I stood up from the stool, towering over him as he knelt in the dust. I don't like black brooches, Xavier. I don't like sitting in the back seat. I don't like cold leftovers, and I don't like peach tarts from a bakery in a town I never want to see again. I reached out, picked up the white pastry box, and dropped it cleanly into the metal scrap bin beside my potter's wheel. Xavier stared at the trash bin, his face turning an ashen, sickly gray. Wanda, please, he gasped, his fingers reaching out to touch the hem of my apron but stopping in midair, terrified of my stillness. Give me one chance. Just one. Let me make it up to you. You can't make up for 20 years, Xavier, I said, looking down at him with an expression of pure, unblemished peace. Because the girl who waited for you to notice her died on the morning of our wedding. I pointed toward the open courtyard gate where the blue ocean stretched out beneath the endless sky. Take your diamond, Mr. Shepherd, and leave my studio. Xavier knelt in the gravel for a long time. He looked at the pink diamond in his palm, looked at the trash bin, and finally looked into my eyes. He searched for anger. He searched for resentment. He searched for the lingering spark of the desperate, obedient girl who used to cry in the dark of his car. He found nothing. There was only the vast, terrifying silence of an empty room. Slowly, agonizingly, Xavier pushed himself up from the ground. His legs wobbled. His shoulders hunched, his hands clutching the velvet box against his chest like a broken bone. He didn't speak another word. He turned around, his shoes crunching slowly against the gravel, and walked out through the bougainvillea arch into the blinding, indifferent sunlight. I watched him go until his shadow disappeared around the corner of the harbor road. Then I sat back down at my wheel, stepped on the pedal, and let the cool, wet clay spin beneath my hands once more. 1 year later, the seaside pavilion of the South City Cultural Center was packed with hundreds of art collectors, gallery directors, and international critics for the opening night of my solo exhibition, The First Slice. The gallery was bathed in warm, luminous track lighting. On pedestals of polished raw timber sat 50 ceramic sculptures, vessels of burning terracotta, vases of deep oceanic cobalt, and platters glazed in brilliant, sun-drenched gold. In the center of the main hall stood the centerpiece of the collection, a towering 4-foot-tall ceramic installation depicting a massive, splitting pomegranate, carved from pure white porcelain on the outside, but bursting open to reveal a core of brilliant, blood-red tourmaline crystals catching the gallery lights like liquid fire. The plaque beside it read, "The core Wanda Young dedicated to the ones who were told they were only worth the shadow." M.S. Young, a senior critic from the International Art Review, said, raising his champagne flute toward me with a warm, respectful bow. Your work has redefined modern ceramic narrative in this country. The emotional transition from containment to absolute liberation in this collection is breathtaking. Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I smiled, raising my glass of sparkling cider. It took a long time to find the right temperature for the kiln. Beside me, Julie laughed, her arm linked through mine, looking radiant in a bright emerald evening dress. I told you she was a genius 3 years ago. Nobody listens to the business manager. We laughed together, the sound mingling with the soft jazz quartet playing near the terrace. Later that evening, after the last of the collectors had departed and the gallery doors were closed to the public, Julie and I sat on the wooden steps of the pavilion terrace, overlooking the dark, glittering expanse of the southern sea. The night air was warm, carrying the gentle scent of salt water and blooming night jasmine. Julie reached into a cooler bag and pulled out a large, chilled green watermelon, setting it on a cutting board between us. She pulled out a long kitchen knife and sliced the melon cleanly in half with a crisp, satisfying crunch. The fruit was deep, vibrant red, glistening with sweet juice, completely seedless. Julie took the knife, carved out a thick, round, perfect slice right from the very center of the heart, and placed it directly into my hands on a clean porcelain plate. Here, Julie smiled, her eyes crinkling in the moonlight. The reddest, sweetest piece from the middle. Just for you. I looked down at the plate in my hands. The watermelon was cool, fragrant, and heavy with sweetness. I lifted the slice, took a large, unhurried bite, and let the pure, unadulterated sugar wash over my tongue. It was crisp. It was sweet. And for the rest of my life, every single slice was going to be mine.